This week, on Parshat Pinchas Tavshin Pei Gimel, Asar Vegadol Nafal B'Yisrael, a great Jewish leader of the 20th and 21st century, passed away at 88. Rabbi Avraham Shalom, Rabbi Yehuda Gold, known as Rav Shalom Gold, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I, amongst many, was influenced by him from a very early age and for many years after. And I'd like to share a very few brief reflections for those that didn't know him, not because I'm giving a proper hesped, this is not the time or place, but rather because I can't go through the week of Shiva for his memory without sharing something about his life. He was a great speaker, and therefore I'm not going to ramble on and on. I'm going to put my words into 4 distinct categories, or to be more precise, paragraphs only. He was a learner, he was a teacher, he was a lover, and he was a fighter. And because of those 4 things, that made his life, and every time you met with him, dramatic. Number 1, a learner. He learned in the best yeshivas, Torah Vadas, Ner Yisrael, Panovich, Chevron, but that's not the time I knew him in the 50s. I knew him in the 80s and 90s when he was already pretty gray, if not white, in his beard. And allow me to give you the following scene. Before my bar mitzvah, as a member of his shul, the rabbi wanted to meet the bar mitzvah boys. So I knocked on his door at a prescribed time, walked in very nervous. I didn't have any of the self-confidence I have today, and I was very shy. So I walked in, I sat down on his dining room table. There were about 5 svarim in front of him. He started to talk to me, I answered questions. I remember he made me relay my parsha that I was about to learn on Shabbos, and then the phone rang, and his beloved Beila, Zichrona Livracha, is on the phone. So you know when you hear a phone call, you only hear what the person in front of you is saying. You don't know what they're saying in the receiver. And this was the conversation. Yes, hi Beila. Me? I'm learning a little. So obviously she asked, what are you doing now? And he said, I'm learning a little. Now, as years went on, I also started to teach and give shiurim, and I know very well you don't prepare a shiur without a pad of paper in front of you, or a computer or something to write down your notes. He had none of that in front of him, and I don't believe he was preparing a shiur. As he said to his wife, I am learning. The man who learned at an early age didn't stop learning, even as he got older. I remember every Shabbos he would come into shul with a stack of svarim to learn when it's permissible during davening. The fact that he can go before the Kisei HaKavod and answer HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give him the big test. Not just the test of Nasata Venatata Be'emunah, where you honest, to which you'd be able to say a resounding yes, but rather Kavata Itim LaTorah, Pilpalta B'Chochmah. I am absolutely sure that here too he'd be able to give a resounding yes. Anyone that listens to his shiurim from years afterwards will know he didn't repeat a shiur. There were always chidushim. There were always new things he found. At his funeral, Rabbi Tau, the former rabbi of the Bayit in Toronto, said that just the week of his ptira, he said he has to speak Friday night at Beit Tuvei Ha'ir, and therefore let's come up with a good kasha. 88 years old, probably gave 50 speeches on Parshat Pinchas, and yet wanted to come up with something new. First and foremost, he never stopped learning, every free moment. Number 2, he was not only a learner, he was a teacher. You can listen to his shiurim online and you will see clarity and conviction in what he said. He never held back what he thought, but more importantly, every thought was thought out. He wasn't haphazard, he wasn't flippant, both in personal conversations, but more importantly, in classes he gave. You can agree or disagree with his ideas, his chidushim on the Parsha, on Megillas Esther, on the Gemara, but you would be debating with someone who you know very well where he stood, because he was clear and coherent in the way he spoke. He was literally what Chazal say, that how do you know someone's a Talmud Chacham? That you ask him a question and he's not make gum game. He's not someone who starts to stutter, but rather, if he had a thought, it was said clearly. It was thought out. And thus, you never came away from a lecture or a speech saying, I didn't understand what he said. A primary teacher who founded the Jerusalem College for Adults and who never stopped giving classes, coming up with chidushim and sharing them. Not just being a personal learner, but a teacher par excellence. Number 3, he was a lover. I can't think of a bigger lover of Eretz Yisrael, of the beloved land of Israel, than him. Only someone like him would get stuck in traffic and say, it must be in Shamayim that David HaMelech came along and said, I want to teach Shalom Gold how great Yerushalayim is today. That it's more full with Jews than ever. So I'm going to put him in a traffic jam. He was a lover of Eretz Yisrael who was 100% a rightist politically against the Oslo agreements, fighting against them tooth and nail. He was someone that loved everything about Eretz Yisrael. It was very difficult to ever have him say any fault on what's happening. At best, you could hear him say, the government of Israel is wrong, but the land of Israel is perfect. Indeed, during the time of the year where we mourn for the Beit HaMikdash and we mourn for the Churban, Bayit Rishon and Bayit Sheni, this was someone who was 100%, as that same Gemara in Shabbos says, Tzipita li-Yeshua. Did you actively look forward to the redemption? Indeed, this is someone who actively looked for signs that God loves Eretz Yisrael, God loves the Jewish people living in Israel, and thus God is sending us signs constantly. He was absolutely besides himself that more people don't see these explicit signs. He was the one that said, if you want to learn what God says, learn the Torah, learn the Gemara. If you want to see God, go to Shuk of Machane Yehuda, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin says explicitly that there's no bigger Kates Megula, there is no bigger indication that the Geula is here, or at least starting, than the fact that the Jewish people in the land of Israel are able to bring crops out of the land, that Jewish hands are successful in making this land sprout again. So if you want to feel the Geula, he said, go to Shuk Machane Yehuda and you'll feel the Geula. He was besides himself. That every Monday and Thursday Jews say in the Vehu Rachum, the long Tachanun, one line that's not a pasuk. Avinu Abba Rachaman, our Father, our merciful Father in heaven. Har'enu ot letovah, show us a good sign. V'kabetz nefutzoteinu mi'arba kanfot ha'aretz, and bring all the dispersed Jews back from the four corners of the earth. It's right there. We're asking for a sign. And there's no bigger kibbutz galuyot than what we see before our eyes. And he was besides himself in his love for Eretz Yisrael that more people didn't see it. But beyond being a learner his entire life, an amazing teacher, and a lover of this land of Israel and the Jewish people, he was one more thing, a fighter. He fought for what he believed. He founded organizations and institutions that he felt was necessary. From an Eruv when there was no Eruv, and a mikvah where there was no mikvah, to founding the organization of rabbis that would fight against giving land for peace, because he felt that was a terrible thing, to many other things that he was involved with. He never sat idly by. And in my humble opinion, he didn't just fight the big battles, land for peace, whatnot. You could see his letters to the Jerusalem Post, where some Joe Schmo wrote an article. You didn't have to, as a rabbi, respond to it. And he felt, yes, you do. It's out there, you have to respond. He heard a rabbi give a terrible lecture with a terrible hashkafa. He responded. He heard someone that went ahead and interpreted the Chumash in the wrong way. He responded. He was a fighter that felt in his kishkis that it's not enough to say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. What does he know? He went ahead and made it public. It's one thing that between the children and the kugel on Shabbos, we say to ourselves, this is bad and that is bad, but it's time for my nap now. It's a totally different thing to come out and actually do something about it. And in every instance he felt that there was a need to do something, he did. He got up and he did it. In young age and in old age. So indeed, Rabbi Shalom Gold was a learner, a teacher, a lover, and a fighter, which made almost every meeting with him dramatic. When you met him, you didn't just say, hey, how are you? How's everything? How's everything by your kids? Have a good day. It was always a dramatic meeting. There was something he said and the way he said it that made it dramatic. The last time I met him was very interesting because I want to start with the many times I met him first. I used to, for a while, once a week, for work, find myself in the center of the city. And when I walked into Heichal Shlomo, he was walking from Yeshurun, where he gave one shir, to the Israel Center that took over the Jerusalem College of Adults he founded, to give another shir. So many a times, I'm talking about week after week, I happened to get there at the time that he was walking. He had a chovat tembel, as we say in Hebrew, a casket in Yiddish, on his head. He had his notes and his svarim under his arm, and he was walking down King George Street. And obviously, I always said hello. The Gemara said it's not derech eretz to say Shalom Aleichem to a Rabbi, and I definitely considered him as our first rabbi in Israel, one of my Rabbeim. So very, shyly, I went up to him and said, hi, Rabbi Gold. Didn't say Shalom Aleichem. And each time he would stop, he would say, how are you? How's work going? Wonderful. It's so important. And then he would ask how my parents were. And every time he responded, there was something in his voice that made it dramatic. He didn't take life as a coincidence. And thus, his autobiography, which I, from the bottom of my heart, advise everyone to read, is called Touching History, because he really felt that life is not just haphazard, you happen to be here. He felt he was touching history. He felt that it was dramatic to live at this time. And this leads me to the last time I saw him. The last time I saw him was at a rabbinic convention in Yerushalayim. And it was time to break for lunch. And as everybody knows, in shul, at rabbinic conventions, people are hungry. So the minute there was lunchtime, everyone filed out. I somehow, for some reason, didn't file out. And it happened to be the last day of the 11 months that I was saying Kaddish for my father, Zichrono Livracha. My father, nafsho keshura benafsho of Rabbi Gold, in ways I can't begin to tell you. He felt that he was the quintessential rabbi of a shul and of a community. Even when we moved out of his community, he continued to follow his shiurim online, listen to them attentively, and be inspired by them. So it happens to be that day, and as we're filing out, I see Rabbi Gold sitting there. Obviously, he was elderly already. He didn't feel he could push the crowd, so he waited till everyone left in order to get down to lunch. I went up to him and, of course, said hello. And I told him, Rabbi, it is, in my opinion, not a coincidence that on this particular day where I'm about to say the last Kaddish, I meet you. I was trying to talk in a way like him. And he gave me a dramatic answer. A dramatic answer that went something like this. I'm not quoting him word for word. There's hashgacha pratis, and there is no coincidences. And he's right. He's 100% right. Rabbi Shalom Gold, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, Rav Avraham Shalom, Rabbi Yehuda, a man who spanned the Haredi world together with the religious Zionist world. Never took off his black hat and black kippah, and yet felt totally at home in the religious Zionist world. A man who was a teacher, was a learner, was a lover, and was a fighter. Above all, felt that life was not a coincidence. Life is dramatic, and we need to use the opportunities in order to make it even more substantial. And maybe this is why every Shabbos, when we don't have bakasha in davening, we don't have request, we do have one request, starting with the words, Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha. God, sanctify us with your mitzvot. Don't let us just do a mitzvah and say, over with, check off my list. Make it substantial. Make it dramatic. Make it something that will have a residue on your body and on your soul, even after you've done the mitzvah. This was the life Rav Shalom Gold led, and I hope and pray that the many that were influenced by him, including yours truly, will be able to live up to that legacy of constantly feeling the divine touch of God and understanding that we're not living at coincidental times. We're living on purpose right now. And therefore, it's our job to always ask ourselves, how do we make life even more substantial? Yehi zichro shel adam gadol zeh baruch, and more importantly, may his memory induce others to indeed action to make life all the more substantial. Tiyeh nafshato tzura b'tzror chaim.